Welcome back to From Opinion to Insight, ready to discover answers for today's questions in our own history, examining a really tumultuous period from the late 19th through the mid-20th century.
That's right. To extract crucial insights about conflict, justice, accountability, and try to understand how these, huge geopolitical shifts, economic upheavals, and the rise of powerful ideologies really shaped the world we live in now.
It's about digging into those profound questions that come up when societies face war, authoritarianism, systemic injustice, seeing what lessons these historical records and philosophical views hold for us.
Precisely. Moving beyond just the headlines, so to speak.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with the road to global conflict, specifically how Europe tried to build peace after Napoleon and why it ultimately crumbled.
Right. So after Napoleon's final defeat in 1815, you have the Congress of Vienna. Their big aim was to restore balance of power, basically stop any one nation dominating Europe like France had.
Trying to put the pieces back together.
Exactly. They set up structures like the German Confederation, this loose union of, 39 German-speaking states kind of under Austrian leadership. But, that system turned out to be pretty fragile.
It couldn't really contain the forces bubbling up, could it?
No, especially nationalism. Despite that push for balance, two major unifications just completely reshaped the continent.
Okay, let's talk Italy first. What happened there?
Well, Italy was basically a patchwork of kingdoms and duchies. But this desire for a united Italy, the Risorgimento, grew stronger. It was led mainly by the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia in the north, under King Victor Emmanuel II. And he had his very clever prime minister, Cavour, who used diplomacy and war against Austria to liberate northern territories. Then you had Giuseppe Garibaldi down south.
The revolutionary figure.
Yeah, with his red shirts. He conquered the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies and, interestingly, handed his conquests over to Victor Emmanuel. So boom, 1861, the Kingdom of Italy is proclaimed.
But not quite finished yet.
Not quite. Venetia was still Austrian. So Italy cleverly sided with Prussia in the Austro-Prussian War in 1866 and got Venetia as a reward.
Smart move.
And then in 1870, they took Rome, ending the Pope's temporal rule there, and Rome became the capital. Italy was finally fully united.
Okay, and just as Italy is doing this, something similar, maybe even more impactful, is happening just north, Germany.
Germany was also this collection of states within that confederation led by Austria, but Prussia, a really powerful German state, wanted to unify Germany under its leadership.
Enter Bismarck.
Enter Otto von Bismarck, the Prussian chancellor, a master strategist. He achieved unification through a series of, calculated wars. First, defeating Austria in 1866, kicking them out of German affairs, essentially.
Right.
Then he provoked France into the Franco-Prussian War in 1870. France was crushed.
Now, the consequences were huge.
Huge. Prussia demanded Alsace-Lorraine huge reparations. And the ultimate symbolic act, the proclamation of the German Empire, wasn't in Berlin, but in the Palace of Versailles, January 1871.
Wow. In Versailles itself. That must have left some incredibly deep scars in France.
Oh, absolutely. Devastating. This defeat fueled this intense French feeling called revanchism, this burning desire for revenge to get Alsace-Lorraine back.
And that drove their foreign policy for years.
For decades, it was central. So the key takeaway here isn't just, two countries unified. It's that these shifts completely shattered the old European order. Germany's a new superpower, France is seeking revenge, Austria's weakened, Italy's a new player. The balance is gone. It's suddenly a much more volatile place.
So what does this all mean heading into the early 20th century? Tensions obviously ramping up.
By then, Europe was, a powder keg. You can boil it down to maybe four main underlying causes fueling conflict. MAIN, sometimes people call it.
MAIN, okay.
M for militarism. This belief that a strong military is vital for prestige and security led to a massive arms race, bigger armies, bigger navies, everyone trying to outdo each other. A for alliances, these complex defensive pacts. You have the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, and the Triple Entente, France, Great Britain, Russia. The idea was defense, but it meant a fight between two could drag everyone else. Imperialism. Remember the Colonial Conference of Berlin?
Dividing up Africa, yeah.
Precisely. The scramble for colonies, resources, global influence. European powers were constantly bumping up against each other overseas.
Okay. And.
And for nationalism. This intense loyalty to your own nation, often, unfortunately, coupled with the idea that other nations were inferior, it fueled expansionist ideas and rivalries.
So you've got this incredibly tense atmosphere. The powder keg is full. What was the single spark that finally lit the fuse? The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. What happened?
June 28, 1914, he was shot by Gavrilo Princip, a Bosnian Serb nationalist who wanted Bosnia to be part of Serbia, not Austria-Hungary.
And Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia.
They did. They issued this incredibly harsh ultimatum to Serbia on July 23rd.
The sources make it clear. Because of this pre-existing web of alliances, it just spiraled.
Instantly. Almost instantly. Austria-Hungary's ultimatum to Serbia. Russia starts mobilizing to support Serbia. Germany sees that, declares war on Russia August 1st, then declares war on France August 3rd because France is allied with Russia. It just cascaded.
Germany's plan for a quick win, the von Schlieffen plan.
The idea was speed. Knock out France quickly by invading through neutral Belgium before Russia could get its massive army fully ready to fight.
Invading neutral Belgium, that's a big deal.
A huge deal, a clear violation of international law, and that's what brought Great Britain in. Germany invaded Belgium on August 4th, and Britain, under King George V, declared war on Germany that same day.
And the Belgians resisted.
Fiercely under King Albert I. They slowed the Germans down at forts, destroyed infrastructure.
And did they use flooding, too?
They did, famously. Flooded the Yser Plain. It created this massive water barrier that essentially stopped the German advance in that sector, a remarkable act of defense.
The quick victory Germany wanted, it didn't happen.
No. The Belgians bought time. The French stopped the Germans at the Battle of the Marne in September 1914, and then both sides dug in.
Which led to trench warfare.
Exactly. This brutal, static warfare defined the Western Front, especially in Belgium and France. Miles and miles of trenches.
And that no man's land in between.
Yeah, this deadly, muddy, cratered zone filled with barbed wire and bodies. Just horrific.
Life in those trenches sounds unimaginable. What were the conditions like?
Truly terrible. Freezing cold, knee-deep water sometimes, constant dampness leading to trench foot, hunger, disease, lice, and just the constant grinding fear of shelling or attack.
The psychological toll must have been immense.
Immense. We saw the rise of shell shock, what we now recognize as severe PTSD. Soldiers trembling, unable to speak, completely traumatized, and often misunderstood back then, sadly.
And this wasn't just soldiers fighting soldiers, was it? It involved everyone.
Absolutely. It became a total war. Whole societies were mobilized. Factories churned out weapons and munitions. Women took on vital roles in factories, farms, healthcare jobs previously done by men.
Filling the gaps.
Critical work. Even kids got involved, collecting scrap metal or helping on farms. Modern war, we learned, consumes everything and everyone.
The Industrial Revolution clearly changed warfare forever. What were the new technologies causing this?
Oh, a terrifying list. Machine guns, which would mow down lines of advancing soldiers. Artillery became much more powerful, devastating landscapes and defenses.
And chemical weapons.
Yes, horrific things like mustard gas, chlorine gas, causing burns, blindness, drowning people in their own fluids. Tanks made their first appearance, trying to break the stalemate. Submarines, U-boats, changing naval warfare.
It just sounds like mechanized slaughter.
It became an attrition warfare, grinding down the enemy. Gaining just a few hundred yards could cost tens, even hundreds of thousands of lives. It was a scale of death nobody had foreseen.
What about the other fronts? You mentioned the Western Front stalemate. How was it elsewhere?
The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, opening new fronts.
Hoping to regain lost ground.
Pretty much. They fought against British forces and also against Arab forces who were encouraged by the British to revolt against Ottoman rule.
And tragically, this is where we see one of the first modern genocides, isn't it?
Yes. The Armenian Genocide, starting in 1915. Over 1 million Armenians, a Christian minority within the Ottoman Empire, were systematically murdered, deported, marched into deserts to die.
Why? What triggered it?
The Ottoman leadership used them as a scapegoat, especially after some military failures against Russia. They accused Armenians of disloyalty, of collaborating with the enemy.
Terrifying.
It was systematic. Disarmament, arrests, executions of men, then death marches for women, children, the elderly. Driven by this nationalist ideology of the Young Turks in power, it's a chilling example of how wartime can be used as cover for atrocities against civilians.
The war spread even further, didn't it?
Absolutely. Japan quickly joined the Allies, mainly seeing an opportunity to seize German colonies in China and the Pacific, expanding its own influence.
In China.
China joined the Allies later, hoping for a seat at the peace table. Didn't send soldiers to fight, but sent thousands of laborers to Europe for support roles.
And Africa's involvement.
European colonies in Africa were automatically drawn in, German colonies were attacked, African soldiers, askaris, were recruited, often forcibly, by their colonial masters to fight in Africa and even Europe under terrible conditions. It caused immense suffering and resentment. The Eastern Front, Germany and Austria-Hungary versus Russia, was different. More mobile, less trench-bound, mainly because of the vast distances.
But still huge losses.
Immense Russian losses. Their army was often poorly equipped, poorly led. This contributed massively to the discontent back home, the food shortages, the chaos, leading eventually to the Russian revolutions in 1917.
Right, the Tsar overthrown, Lenin and the Bolsheviks taking power.
Exactly. And signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with Germany in early 1918, pulling Russia out of the war completely.
Which freed up German troops to the west.
It did.
So the war is dragging on, Russia's out. What finally tilted the balance?
Two major things in 1917. First, Russia pulling out, as we said. But second, and crucially, the United States entering the war.
Why did the U.S. finally join?
Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare was a key factor sinking American ships. Plus, there was President Woodrow Wilson's vision of making the world safe for democracy. The U.S. declared war on Germany in April 1917.
And that made a big difference.
A massive difference. Fresh troops, vast industrial resources, money. It came just as the Allies were utterly exhausted. It tipped the scales decisively.
So Germany makes one last push.
Yeah, the Spring Offensive in 1918 on the Western Front, it made initial gains but ultimately failed. The Allies, now bolstered by the Americans, counterattacked effectively. Germany was collapsing internally. 2 strikes, mutiny, starvation.
And the Kaiser.
Kaiser Wilhelm II lost support, fled to the Netherlands in November 1918. A new German government was formed, and they signed the Armistice. November 11th, 1918, the guns finally fell silent.
After all that devastation, it really forces the question, can war ever be truly justified, even as a means to peace? Philosophers have really wrestled with this.
Deeply. You go back to Thomas Aquinas and the just war theory. It needs a lawful authority, a just cause, like self-defense, right intention, and it must be a last resort, with proportional means.
But who gets to decide what's just? That seems tricky.
It's incredibly tricky. Then you have someone like Thomas Hobbes who basically saw war, or the potential for it, as the natural state without a strong ruler. For him, the violence of the state might be necessary to enforce peace and order. A paradox.
Okay, and Kant?
Immanuel Kant took the opposite view. Peace wasn't just desirable, it was a moral duty, waging war for peace, a contradiction in terms for him. True, lasting peace could only come from reason, international law, and just institutions, not from winning wars.
A more idealistic approach.
Definitely. And then you have thinkers like Mahatma Gandhi who went even further. For Gandhi, violence was always wrong. Intrinsically, it just breeds more violence, more suffering.
And Hannah Arendt adds another layer, about violence itself.
Yes, Arendt argued that violence, by its very nature, destroys trust and communication, the very things needed for political life and peace. It can achieve short-term goals, maybe, but it can't create stability or legitimacy. And her concept of the banality of evil.
Right, how ordinary people can participate in horrific things.
Following orders, not thinking critically, it suggests that violence often comes not from deep-seated malice, but from a kind of thoughtlessness, a failure of moral imagination, a really powerful warning.
So the war ends. How did the victors try to build that lasting peace this time? What happened at Versailles?
Well, the Treaty of Versailles, signed June 28, 1919, the location itself was symbolic.
The same place the German Empire was declared.
Exactly. Talk about French revanchism in action. The main players negotiating were France, Britain, and the US, and they had pretty different goals.
France wanted payback.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Georges Clemenceau, the French leader, wanted Germany punished severely. France had suffered enormously. He pushed for massive reparations, war damages based on Article 231, the infamous war guilt clause that blamed Germany entirely.
Ouch.
Plus severe military restrictions, tiny army, no air force, no submarines, no tanks,
Yeah.
and territorial losses Alsace-Lorraine back to France, land of Poland, all overseas colonies gone. The Rhineland demilitarized, basically weakened Germany so it could never threaten France again.
Which brings us right to our second big question.
Can a people be held responsible for the actions of its government?
Exactly, because what about Britain?
David Lloyd George, the British PM, was sort of in the middle. The British public wanted Germany punished, but Lloyd George also knew that crippling the German economy wasn't good for European trade and recovery. He tried to moderate some of the harshest demands.
And the U.S. Wilson had his big ideas.
Yeah, President Woodrow Wilson came with his 14 points, very idealistic. Advocated for self-determination for nations, free trade, and crucially, a League of Nations, an international body to resolve disputes peacefully.
The League was created, but it had problems from the start.
Big problems. Ironically, the U.S. Senate refused to ratify the treaty, so the U.S. never even joined its own creation. That severely weakened it. Plus, Germany and the new Soviet Union were excluded initially, so it bred resentment and distrust right away. A missed opportunity, really.
How did Germany react to the treaty?
They saw it as a diktat, a dictated peace. They weren't allowed to negotiate, just sign. The war guilt clause, the reparations, the losses. It caused huge economic problems and really destabilized the new Weimar Republic. It became fuel for extremist groups later on.
So Europe's struggling with this uneasy peace. What's happening across the Atlantic in the 1920s?
Ah, the roaring 20s in the U.S. Period of incredible economic boom, Mass production took off. Cars like the Ford Model T, radios, refrigerators. People started buying things on installment plans, using credit. The rise of a real consumer society.
And this American culture started spreading.
Big time. Hollywood movies, jazz music, dance crazes like the Charleston. It became known as Americanization. You saw it in big European cities too, Berlin, Paris. A feeling of modernity, excitement, maybe escapism after the war.
But it sounds like this boom was built on shaky foundations.
Very shaky. Lots of speculation in the stock market, lots of borrowing, buying on credit. It was a bit of a bubble.
And the bubble burst.
Dramatically. Black Thursday, October 24th, 1929. The New York stock market crashed. Panic selling, prices plummeting. Confidence just evaporated overnight.
And this wasn't just an American problem.
No, it triggered a global economic crisis, the Great Depression. Businesses failed everywhere, factories closed, unemployment soared, banks collapsed.
And Germany was hit particularly hard.
Devastated. They were heavily reliant on American loans to pay reparations and rebuild. When those loans dried up, their economy imploded, mass unemployment, terrible poverty. It created this desperate atmosphere.
Fertile ground for extremism.
Exactly. People lost faith in democracy, in the existing system. The economic crisis was a direct pathway to political upheaval.
Which brings us to the rise of these authoritarian and totalitarian regimes. Can you quickly clarify the difference?
Sure. An authoritarian regime is basically power concentrated in one leader or a small group. Limited political freedom, dissent is suppressed, no real elections or independent courts, but they don't necessarily try to control every aspect of life.
Okay. And totalitarian?
Totalitarian takes it much further. It seeks total control, public and private life, using things like a pervasive secret police, constant propaganda, a personality cult around the leader, controlling education, culture, aiming to shape how people think and live, down to the smallest detail. All opposition is ruthlessly crushed.
Let's look at the case studies. Russia first.
Right. We mentioned the 1917 revolutions. Then Lenin's Bolsheviks seized power in the October Revolution.
Promising peace, bread, and land.
Yes. After a brutal civil war against the anti-communist whites, they established the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, in 1922. When Lenin died, Joseph Stalin maneuvered himself into power.
And Stalin built a totalitarian state.
Absolutely. The Communist Party was the only party. The NKVD, the secret police, was everywhere. Mass arrests, show trials, executions, the Gulag forced labor camps. He imposed collectivization on agriculture, causing famine, and pushed industrialization through brutal 5-year plans. Total control.
What about Italy?
Similar story, different flavor, post-war dissatisfaction, economic chaos. Italy felt cheated despite being on the winning side. They didn't get the territory they expected. Plus, economic hardship, strikes, fear of communism. Benito Mussolini,
Founder of fascism.
yes, founded the Fascist Party in 1919. It was nationalist, militaristic, believed in a strong leader, violence as a political tool, the state above everything.
And he came to power how?
Through intimidation, essentially. His march on Rome in 1922, thousands of his black shirt followers converged on the capital. It pressured the king, Victor Emmanuel III, into appointing Mussolini prime minister.
And then he dismantled democracy.
Systematically. Changed election laws, banned opposition parties, took control of the press. Italy became a fascist dictatorship, maybe not quite as all-encompassing and controlling private life as Stalin's Russia or Hitler's Germany would become, but definitely suppressing freedom.
Which brings us to Germany and Nazism. The economic crisis just fueled support for Adolf Hitler and his NSDAP, the Nazi Party.
Adolf Hitler, an angry WWII veteran, joined the tiny German Workers' Party, which became the Nazi Party, NSDAP.
He tried a coup early on.
Yes, the Beer Hall Push in Munich, 1923. It failed. He was jailed. But he used the time to write Mein Kampf, My Struggle.
Laying out his ideology.
All of it. Extreme nationalism, the idea of a superior Aryan race, virulent anti-Semitism, blaming Jews for Germany's problems, the need for Lebensraum, living space in Eastern Europe, hatred of democracy, belief in the Führer principle, one absolute leader.
And the 1929 crash gave him his opening.
A huge opening. Unemployment skyrocketed, desperation grew, and the Nazis' promises of restoring order, national pride, and jobs gained massive traction. They became the largest party. In January 1933, President Hindenburg reluctantly appointed Hitler chancellor.
And he moved fast.
Incredibly fast. The Reichstag fire, just weeks later, was blamed on communists and used as an excuse to suspend basic civil rights, freedom of speech, assembly, the press. Then the Enabling Act essentially gave Hitler dictatorial powers, bypassing parliament.
Total control.
When Hindenburg died in 1934, Hitler merged the roles of chancellor and president, becoming the Führer. Nazi Germany became fully totalitarian. The Gestapo secret police, the SS terror and repression, control over everything, media, education, culture, and the systematic persecution of Jews began almost immediately, escalating tragically over the years.
Were these ideologies just confined to those three countries?
Not at all. The crisis of democracy was widespread. Communist parties, inspired by the Soviet Union, gained members elsewhere, like the KPB in Belgium, and fascist or authoritarian movements popped up all over.
In Belgium, too.
Yes. You had Leon de Grel's Rexist movement in Wallonia, and groups like Verdenasso and the VNV in Flanders, pushing for authoritarianism, sometimes Flemish independence. Even in Britain, Oswald Mosley led the British Union of Fascists.
Though they didn't gain as much power there.
No, British democracy proved more resilient. But it shows how appealing these anti-democratic, strong leader ideologies seemed to many people across Europe during times of deep crisis. Authoritarianism promised answers, order, national renewal.
This leads to a really difficult question. When a government commits horrific acts, like the Nazis did, can the people, the citizens, be held responsible too? Or is it just the leaders?
Philosophers have really grappled with this. Kant, again, would stress individual moral responsibility. His categorical imperative means you have a duty to act morally, regardless of orders or the political situation. Ignoring injustice, even under duress, compromises your own human dignity. So for Kant, guilt is personal, but widespread failure to act morally creates a kind of collective failing.
And Arndt's banality of evil speaks directly to this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Her point about Eichmann wasn't that he was a monster, but that he was terrifyingly normal. He just followed rules, organized logistics, didn't think about the horrific reality of what he was doing. Obedience in an unjust system that carries responsibility.
Is there a perspective based on consequences?
Yes. Consequentialism looks at the outcomes. If a population's silence or compliance contributes to suffering and atrocities, then from that perspective, they bear some responsibility for those consequences. What kind of citizens does a healthy society need? Democracy requires citizens to cultivate virtues like justice, critical thinking, civic engagement. If people become apathetic, fearful, or just look out for themselves, the whole system weakens and becomes vulnerable to tyranny. So responsibility lies partly in failing to uphold those civic virtues.
Okay, so we've seen the rise of these regimes. How did the world stumble into another world war just 2 decades after the first one ended?
Well, those same root causes MAIN were back, often in even more extreme forms. German nationalism under Hitler was overtly aggressive, demanding the reversal of Versailles, uniting German-speaking peoples, and seeking Lebensraum in the East.
Imperialism was still a factor.
Definitely. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935. Japan was waging a brutal war of conquest against China from 1937. These were clear acts of imperial aggression.
And militarism.
Germany was rapidly rearming, openly defying the Versailles Treaty, building tanks, planes, a bigger army. Italy and Japan were also pouring resources into their militaries, believing might makes right.
What about diplomacy? Did attempts to prevent war fail?
Spectacularly. Hitler kept pushing boundaries, remilitarizing the Rhineland in 1936, the Anschluss annexing Austria in March 1938, then demanding the Sudetenland, a German-speaking part of Czechoslovakia.
Which led to the Munich Conference.
September 1938, Britain's Neville Chamberlain and France's Edouard Daladier met Hitler and Mussolini. They adopted a policy of appeasement, giving in to Hitler's demands for the Sudetenland, hoping it would satisfy him and prevent war.
Chamberlain's peace for our time.
But it backfired. Hitler saw it as weakness. Just 6 months later, March 1939, he broke his promise and took the rest of Czechoslovakia. Appeasement had failed utterly.
And the final straw.
The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, August 1939. This non-aggression pact between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union stunned the world, sworn enemies agreeing not to fight each other.
And it had secret clauses.
Secret protocols to divide Poland and other parts of Eastern Europe between them. This deal essentially gave Hitler the green light to invade Poland without fearing a Soviet attack from the east.
And that invasion is what truly ignited World War II.
Yes.
So war is declared.
Yeah.
What happens next? Especially for people caught in the middle. There was that strange quiet period first, the phony war.
Yeah, after Poland fell quickly, things were oddly quiet on the Western Front for months. But that ended abruptly in April 1940. Germany launched Operation Weserüberung, invading Denmark and Norway.
Securing resources and northern flank.
Exactly. And then May 10th, 1940, the main event. The Blitzkrieg unleashed across the Low Countries, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and into France. It was devastatingly effective. That's when Churchill replaced Chamberlain in Britain.
Right, the situation demanded strong leadership.
And Belgium's defense, it crumbled quickly under that onslaught.
A totally different kind of warfare from WWII.
Completely. Speed, shock, encirclement. But Allied forces were overwhelmed, pushed back towards the Channel coast.
Leading to Dunkirk.
Yes, Operation Dynamo. Hundreds of thousands of British and French troops were trapped around Dunkirk. Over 300,000 were evacuated back to Britain between late May and early June, using naval ships and hundreds of small civilian boats. A military disaster, but a crucial rescue.
So France fell quickly after that. What was life like in occupied Belgium?
King Leopold III made that highly controversial decision to surrender on May 28, 1940, against his government's advice, who fled to London. He stayed as a prisoner of war. Ordinary Belgians faced curfews, blackouts, German soldiers everywhere, propaganda posters, severe rationing of food, fuel, everything. A thriving black market developed, naturally.
Was there collaboration with the Germans?
Yes, there was. Some political groups, like the VNV in Flanders and Rex in Wallonia, actively collaborated. Tragically, some suspected collaborators arrested by the fleeing Belgian state were even massacred by French troops near Abbeville in the chaos.
But there was resistance, too.
Absolutely. Brave resistance movements emerged, hiding down Allied airmen, running underground newspapers, sabotage, intelligence gathering, all at enormous personal risk. Arrest, torture, deportation to concentration camps were constant threats. It shows the complex, dangerous choices people faced. Immense bravery.
And this is where our final, really chilling question about silence becomes terrifyingly real. June 1941, Operation Barbarossa.
Operation Barbarossa, June 22nd, 1941. A massive surprise attack. Hitler saw it as a war of annihilation against communism and Slavic peoples, whom the Nazis considered racially inferior.
And this is when the Holocaust really begins its most horrific phase.
Yes. The invasion opened the door for the systematic mass murder phase. The systematic genocide of European Jews.
It wasn't immediate, was it? It escalated.
No, it was a step-by-step process. Years of escalating dehumanization, discriminatory laws like the Nuremberg laws back in 1935, stripping Jews of rights, citizenship. Then, with the invasion of the East, you get the Einsatzgruppen and mobile killing squads carrying out mass shootings.
Mobile killing squads.
Mobile killing squads. Their job was to round up and shoot Jews, Roma, communist officials, anyone deemed an enemy, often with help from local collaborators. Bodies dumped in pits.
And then the camps.
The scale demanded a more industrial method. The Wannsee Conference in January 1942 coordinated the final solution, the plan for deporting Jews from all over occupied Europe to extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Sobibor, specifically built for mass murder, usually by gas.
And Belgian Jews were caught up in this.
Tragically, yes. Over 25,000 Jews, and also Roma, were rounded up, held at the Dawson barracks, and deported, mostly to Auschwitz. Chillingly, how the efficiency of this relied on the passivity or cooperation of many ordinary bureaucrats and citizens across Europe.
A truly sobering point. Then the war becomes truly global.
December 7th, 1941. Japan's surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
A date which will live in infamy.
Exactly. It brought the United States fully into the war, declaring war on Japan, Germany and Italy, Japan's allies under the Tripartite Pact, then declared war on the U.S. Now it was a genuinely global conflict.
Forming the basis for the United Nations alliance.
Right. Shortly after Pearl Harbor, on January 1st, 1942, 26 nations signed the Declaration by United Nations, pledging to fight the Axis powers together. This formalized the Allied coalition.
So the U.S. is in, the scale is massive. When did the tide finally start to turn against the Axis powers?
1942 really was the pivotal year. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway in June was a devastating blow to the Japanese Navy. They lost 4 aircraft carriers they couldn't replace easily. It halted their eastward expansion.
And in North Africa.
The Battle of El Alamein, October-November 1942. British forces under Montgomery finally defeated Rommel's Africa Corps. Soon after, American troops landed in Morocco and Algeria. Axis power in North Africa began to crumble.
But the biggest turning point
Had to be Stalingrad, on the Eastern Front. An absolutely brutal citywide battle. The Soviets refused to yield, eventually encircled and destroyed the German Sixth Army.
a catastrophic defeat for Germany.
Catastrophic, huge losses in men and material, and a massive psychological blow. From Stalingrad onwards, the Red Army began its long, slow, bloody push westward towards Berlin. It marked the strategic turning point of the war in Europe.
So with these victories, the Allies could start planning major offensives.
Exactly. They invaded Sicily in July 1943, then mainland Italy. Mussolini was overthrown, though the fighting in Italy was tough and lasted almost until the war's end, but the biggest offensive was yet to come.
D-Day.
D-Day, June 6, 1944. Operation Overlord. Thousands upon thousands of Allied troops, American, British, Canadian, and others landed on the beaches of Normandy in France under General Eisenhower's command.
Opening the long-awaited Western Front.
Precisely. It was the beginning of the end in Western Europe. Heavy fighting followed, but Paris was liberated in August, Brussels, and Antwerp in September. The Allies pushed towards Germany.
And after liberation, in places like Belgium.
It wasn't simple joy. Our sources mention widespread wild repression or street repression. Spontaneous acts of revenge against suspected collaborators, public humiliations, women having their heads shaved, assaults, property destruction, a raw outpouring of anger and score settling after years of occupation.
And then a more formal process.
Yes, the judicial repression followed, with military tribunals set up to try collaborators systematically. Hundreds of thousands of cases were opened, tens of thousands convicted, some even sentenced to death, though many sentences were later commuted. It was a complex and difficult process of dealing with collaboration and seeking justice, leaving scars that lasted for generations.
So how did the war finally draw to a close in Europe?
By early 1945, Allied armies were closing in on Germany from the west and the east. In February, at the Yalta Conference, the Big Three, Roosevelt, Churchill, Stalin, met to plan the final stages and the post-war order.
Deciding Germany's fate.
Yes, they agreed to divide Germany into occupation zones, disarm it completely, pursue denazification, removing Nazi influence, and plan for the United Nations. As the Red Army fought its way into Berlin, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker on April 30th, 1945. Germany surrendered unconditionally a week later, on May 8th. VE Day victory in Europe.
But there were post-war plans to do with Nazi crimes.
Yes. The Allies held the Nuremberg Trials starting in late 1945. Major Nazi leaders were prosecuted for crimes against peace, war crimes, crimes against humanity, holding individual leaders accountable for state actions. A major step.
Setting a precedent.
A huge precedent. It established that individuals, even heads of state, could be held accountable under international law for atrocities. The defense of just following orders was largely rejected. It laid the foundation for modern international criminal law.
But tensions were already emerging between the Allies.
Oh yes. At the Potsdam Conference in July 1945, after Germany's surrender, the cracks were showing. Roosevelt had died. Truman was now U.S. president. Churchill was replaced by Attlee mid-conference. Distrust between Truman and Stalin, especially over the future of Eastern Europe, was palpable. Truman also hinted at the new atomic bomb.
The Cold War beginning already.
The seeds were definitely sown right there. Germany itself remained divided. The Western zones eventually formed the Federal Republic of Germany, West Germany. In 1949, the Soviet zone became the German Democratic Republic, East Germany. Berlin, deep inside East Germany, was also divided.
Leading to the Berlin Wall.
Eventually, yes. To stop East Germans fleeing west through Berlin, the East German government built the Berlin Wall in 1961, a stark physical symbol of the Cold War division that would last for decades.
So Europe's war is over, but the war in Asia continued.
Yes, against Japan. The fighting in the Pacific was incredibly fierce. The U.S. was planning a massive invasion of the Japanese home islands, expected to cause horrific casualties on both sides.
But then came the atomic bomb.
The Manhattan Project had secretly developed it. Truman made the decision to use it. He argued it would force a quick Japanese surrender and ultimately save lives by avoiding that bloody invasion. August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was bombed. August 9th, Nagasaki. The devastation was unprecedented. Tens of thousands killed instantly, many more died later from radiation. Japan announced its surrender on August 15th, formally signing on September 2nd, 1945. World War II was finally over.
And back in Belgium, even after the war, there was still major internal conflict over the king.
Yes, the king's question. It revolved entirely around King Leopold III's actions in 1940, surrendering without government consent, staying in Belgium, meeting Hitler, his wartime marriage.
Deeply divisive.
Extremely. When he wanted to return to the throne after the war, the country split. A referendum, the popular consultation, was held in 1950. Nationally, a small majority voted for his return, but
not everywhere.
no. Wallonia and Brussels strongly opposed his return. There were massive strikes, violent protests, fears of civil war. The country was on the brink.
So he abdicated.
In 1951, yes. To preserve national unity, he abdicated in favor of his young son, Baudouin. It was a traumatic episode that highlighted the deep linguistic, political, and social divisions within Belgium, exacerbated by the war and the controversy over the king's role.
Thinking about the Holocaust, the collaboration, the sheer scale of atrocities, it brings us back to individual responsibility. Does this history force us to conclude that silence itself, doing nothing when you witness injustice, is actually a crime, morally speaking?
Many philosophers would argue yes, or at least that it carries significant moral weight. Kant's duty-based ethics suggests inaction in the face of clear injustice is a violation of your moral duty to uphold universal principles. You become complicit by failing to act.
Aren't seem to imply that too.
Absolutely. Her famous line, "No one has the right to obey in the face of evil," suggests that conforming, staying silent, abdicating thought, these enable atrocities. It's not just the active perpetrators. The passive bystanders contribute to the possibility of evil on a mass scale.
What about existentialists like Sartre?
Sartre would emphasize radical freedom and responsibility. We are condemned to be free, meaning every choice, including the choice not to act, is still a choice we are responsible for. To remain silent is to implicitly choose the side of the oppressor, to deny one's own freedom and responsibility. Authenticity demands engagement. Whether it's legally a crime is one thing, but morally, these thinkers argue, it's deeply problematic.
We've certainly navigated a complex and often dark tapestry of history today. From the roots of devastating world wars to these profound moral questions about responsibility, both individual and collective. It's challenging stuff, but so essential for understanding how societies grapple with conflict and human rights.
Absolutely. And these events, these philosophical debates, they aren't just history lessons locked in the past. They offer powerful insights into human behavior, into power, into the ongoing struggle for justice and peace that continues right now, in our own time. Exploring our own history like this gives us tools, hopefully, for better critical thinking and moral judgment today.
As you, our listeners, reflect on everything we've unpacked, if these lessons of history consistently show the dire consequences of unchecked power, extreme nationalism, and widespread apathy or silence, what then is our active responsibility? To the past, yes, but maybe more importantly, to the future. Thank you for tuning in. We will be back soon with some more food for thoughts.
Wondering about the future, discovering the silence, truth, and bringing together the story of humans, from opinion to insight, and from source to story. We follow the traces through time and memory, echoing patterns from long ago. Keep exploring, building tomorrow. What drives war? What builds a wall? What makes a rise? What marks a fall? We turn the page, we search the frame to understand what still remains. From opinion to insight, and from source to story, we follow the traces through time and memory, echoing patterns from long ago. Keep exploring, building tomorrow.